I will make a try, and I will say that I will say something like managing consultant within modern management, something like that. And my passion is to figure out how can we make people and companies make so much better, feel so much better. So that's what I'm working on. And during all the work I've done, I've found a pattern that is really helping a lot of companies, and that is this pattern of growing the elephant. And I think to really understand what this is about, I think we need to go to the Agile Manifesto to start there. So we will see that we will go to the Agile Manifesto and its 4 values and 12 principles. And actually the idea of being Agile and doing Agile, the difference between those. And to understand that, we need to figure out what that is. So we can start by going to the right on this picture. And then we will find the Agile implementation. And of course, there is unlimited number of practices we can use, and most of us are basing those on some sort of framework like Scrum or SAFe or something. But in this session, I would like to move a little bit more to the left and look for what will we get if we follow those values and principles. And if implementation is more of the how, I would say on the other side, we will see like the reason of Agile, like why we should do Agile. And that is our focus here. And to figure out that, we will start with looking at the Agile Manifesto more in detail, like the values and principles, and we will divide them and group them into different groups. I will not go deeply through this, but my interpretation of the Agile Manifesto and the why and what we will get if we follow is into those different words. Like, for instance, there are a couple of values and principles that will tell us that we should get fast feedback, like we should deliver something early and continuously, and it should be something that is valuable software or working software. And that means it needs to be something that we can actually test. And why should we do that? Well, obviously, because we want to have fast feedback. And then we see something like business people and developers should work together daily throughout the project. Why is that so important? And I would say it's because we need to mobilize the brain power. We need to use every person's knowledge and experience and not have this relation of someone telling anyone else what to do, rather partnership. And the reason why we need to have fast feedback and mobilize brain power is because the learning is so important, that we learn from both those. And if we learn, we also need to be able to react on the new learning, because if we're not able to do that, we will just be frustrated. In the middle here, we have this idea of continuous improvement, which of course is extremely important in both Agile and Lean. And then on each side of that, we have collaboration, which we can see frequently in the Agile Manifesto, but also autonomy. But to understand that idea, I think we should switch this into a picture that I made to make this a little bit easier to understand. This idea of having both collaboration and autonomy. And I see that as different parts of the companies, like teams, who they are collaborating, hooking up with each other just to be able to perform on the mission they have at the moment. So they hook up with different people or different teams, they fix a mission, and then when they get the next mission, they find other constellation. This is continuously changing independently of the organizational limits. But that is another story. So instead, let's look more into this part and make a little bit understanding of how this is in practice. Just to make it a little bit more easy to understand, I will compare it to more traditional plan-driven way of working. And well, the start of everything is that we see a user need. Some users that need something, and we believe that we can deliver something to that users. So then we start down here, maybe 1 year earlier. We examine this need. We're trying to understand it. We send some business analysts on it. We come up with some requirements. We come up with some ideas of solutions. We implement the solution. We test it. We deliver it, and we say, "Ta-da! Here you go. You have this. Will follow up. This will be for your need. So go ahead and buy it." Okay, so the big difference in the Agile way of working here is the idea that this need is just a hypothesis, like, okay, it might be there. So we take the shortest possible step just to verify if this hypothesis is true or not. And we do that by getting fast feedback. And then we mobilize the brain power around that feedback, and then we learn from this, and maybe we find out that this need is not there anymore. At least it might have been there, or it just been that we misunderstood it, but we find it somewhere else now, and we have more knowledge now. And of course, then we just change direction, and we work around this those steps with a pattern of plan, do, check, act, PDCA, or Deming cycle, if you like. And we keep hunting this need, and finally we have something we can present, and now we can say, okay, now we developed this together with you, and it seems like we have found the right place when you want to buy it. Okay, so this could then be said being the answer to why we need Agile. It's a way of learning quickly. Having that knowledge, we can actually find the difference between being and doing Agile. So let's take an example. Here we have this big project, this big hairy project, symbolized here with an elephant. And in the middle, we have a couple of teams working with sprints, and there is no chance that this big elephant could fit into those sprints. So we need to do something. In the normal way we react when we have something huge that needs to get into something small, we slice it. So let's do that. We start slicing, sprint by sprint, we deliver parts of the elephant. But now we stop somewhere here in the middle and say, what's wrong with the picture? Is this really Agile? No, it's not, because we can't get any feedback. It's just the ass of an elephant. It's not working. It's not living. We can't test it with anything. So it will not give us any valuable feedback. So this is actually Scrum, yes, but without Agile. So it's bad Scrum. If we go back to this analogy, then we can say it's like we already decided what the customer need was from the beginning. It was not a hypothesis, it was a truth. So we just divided the way going there by small parts. And if we follow the pattern of plan, do, check, act, it becomes like an old vinyl record, it gets plan, do, 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 do. We're missing the check and act. Okay, so going back, still, we have the problem. Someone wants us to build a big elephant, but we see it as a hypothesis. So we say, okay, what is the smallest tiny thing we can do to verify if this is actually what we need or not? And the answer to that is a tiny baby elephant. So we deliver a tiny baby elephant. And then we try something on it. And this means that we need to understand the customer need. And let's say that was to move logs, for instance. Okay, so can we try big logs on this tiny elephant? Of course not, because then it would have been a big elephant. But we can try to ask this small elephant to move a little stick. Okay, so we do that, and we mobilize some brain power around result, and maybe it did a quite good job, but someone says that, yeah, but there were some by effects, like, there is a reason for this saying, it's like an elephant in the room. So we try to mobilize our brain power about, is this really the best solution? And then someone's come up with that, no, actually this is also moving big logs. And so far we have not heard the expression or the saying that it's like a forklift in the room, so maybe it's better. Then we can change. So this is going Agile. And why this really makes sense is when we look for the risk reduction. Because if we are working with just slicing the elephant like this, the way we are building value, it would look like this: 0, 0, 0, and then we have everything. Okay, so if we can wait the whole time, then we have a happy customer. But if the customer needs to have something delivered after, let's say 80%, we can just say, sorry, we have nothing. And this made a big difference. I heard a story. I talked to a product manager, and he said this was the reason why he started to understand why Agile makes sense. Because he said that he was in a big project, 400 million Swedish kronor, about 40 million euros. And unfortunately, the money ran out before the project. So he needed to ask for more money, and he went to the CEO and asked for more money. He needed 10 more million euros, and the CEO said, no way, you will not get it. And then the project leader said, well, then no way, you will not get nothing out of the 40 million euros you already spent. So the CEO understood that he was actually kidnapped. It needed a ransom money to get anything. If they would have done it this way, like growing the elephant, creating something small, tiny that could do something, like an MVP, minimal viable product, the smallest thing we could at least get some feedback out of. And then if this showed to be the right solution, we could just grow the elephant more and more and more and more. The value will look like this instead. So it means that, yeah, if we wait the full time, we will get the full value. But if we need some value after 80%, we will get some value. So for instance, we might have got an elephant that could lift 250 kilos, and maybe that was enough for 90–95% of the job. At least we had a choice. So if we can compare the different ways, we can see that we have the slicing the elephant, we have the growing the elephant. We can tweak the growing the elephant because we can look for the things we have, the value, and then make sure we make the most important things first. And by doing that, maybe it even makes sense to just trim the tail and cut the last 20% because it's not bringing enough value. Maybe there are some other project we could spend the money on instead. This also opens up for the possibility to be disruptive, that we just change solution because we figure out very early in the project that this is the wrong solution. Okay, so that was the difference between being Agile and doing Agile. And when it comes to handling risk and complexity, it makes all the difference. Okay, let's take a real example what this could mean. This is the story of Tele2 and their merge of Comhem. For those of you that are not from Sweden, both Tele2 and Comhem are two big telecom companies, a little bit different focus, but well, I would say going quite good. When it looks at the products, it goes quite well together. But of course, they had two different systems for customer CRM systems and sales systems and websites and everything. So when they were merged, obviously, one of the first things people were starting talking about was when should we merge the two systems. For that reason, they started the project Aragon, or Aragon like in one system to rule them all. And the project leader, Linda Antonsson, was appointed for this role. And just as a normal project, they went to the people at Tele2 and asked for their requirements, and then they went to the people of Comhem and asked for their requirements. They put those two requirement lists together in a huge product backlog, and then they divided all those parts into a lot of small product backlogs for each team or area, and we're talking about 26 teams here. Okay, so far everything is just the normal traditional waterfall project, big bang release at the end or something like that. But now something happened. In first quarter of 2020, the CEO, Anders Nilsson, he went out to the stakeholders. No, not the stakeholders, the stockholders. and said, okay, so in about a year, we will not be two brands. And by doing that, we will save a lot of money. Okay, so he set a deadline because now we understand that if we are able to be one brand, we need to be one system. Okay, so Linda went back to her plan and tried to figure out when was a possible first release. And unfortunately, it showed that this was not by first quarter of 2021. It was rather 3 years ahead. So we had a problem. Linda and we spoke, and I told her about this story about the elephants, and she felt like, okay, there is actually a possibility here. So look at what we had then. We were now in second quarter of 2020, and she was having the elephant speech for top management, convincing them that this was the way forward. We started to look for what was the first possibility we had to create something. And we said we needed to have that late third quarter of 2020. And literally, I mean, the situation we have here is a lot of parts of elephants. You can see it like that. Like every team, they had started to build their part of a foot or a tail or a trunk or an ear or whatever. And it was all over, but it was just small parts of all this. You couldn't put it together. So the challenge during the summer was to figure out what would the first tiny but living elephant look like. They come up with a solution, an idea, and they start working on that idea. And finally, not really, it was actually October before the first living elephant was built. But now we actually had something really ugly, but it was living. It was not alive in production, I mean, but it was living, so it could be tested. So salespeople could test it, marketing people could test it, sales support people could test it, and so on. And now we changed the tactics. So instead of asking for all the requirements, we said that if you can only get one more thing, what would that be? And then we had all those teams swarming around those absolutely most important things. By doing that, we later had a November elephant, we had a December elephant, and we had a January elephant. Now, actually, this January elephant, and Linda, she called this a pre or early teenager elephant. It actually had some value. And we felt that there was a possibility to release this into production beside the already existing systems. So we decided to do that, and that was a catastrophe. Fortunately, this was not obvious or seen for the customers, so no customer were harmed. But it told us that we don't have the experience of putting things in production in this way, which was lucky because this is just January. We had until March. And we figured out we need to have some sort of deployed pipeline. So we divided. Some people started to work on this pipeline. At the same time, in parallel, we were working on a February elephant and finally a March elephant. And now we came to the situation where we could actually ask the business or the whole company, the top management. They had to decide. On one scale, they had the big savings and the promise from the CEO made 1 year earlier. On the other scale, they had some darlings that had to be killed. So the question was what to pick. And it was actually quite easy for them. They could kill some darlings and be able to deliver on the promise and have all the big savings. So they decided to go out to market with this. As Linda, she called this the maybe 19-year-old elephant or something like that. At the end of the teens, but not really an adult elephant. So the day came. And at the same time, it was decided that this brand X, as it was called before, should be Tele2. So the release button was there. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. Customer service center was fully staffed because we were expecting, a lot of catastrophe again. They pressed the button and everything worked well, because it was so well tested with all the early releases. Even though the releases went to test systems, everything worked very well. And during the day, Linda told me that it was only 4 bugs reported, and all of them were like spelling errors, and that's it. It was not like the project stopped by this, but it was alive, it was in production. They could stop maintaining the old systems, and that made a big difference. So they were still growing the elephant bit by bit. But they were able to deliver, which had not been possible if they had continued just slicing the elephant. There are more things to tell about in this story, about how they could be able to work together and a lot of really interesting stuff, but that will be for another session. So that's the end. Let's see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Tomas.